right, hey guys. I am going to be doing a watercolor demo, and I'm going to show you some different watercolor techniques that you can do at home if you have watercolor and if you have some of the supplies that I'm going to use, okay? So we're going to start out by actually doing an ombre, which an ombre is when one color slowly fades into another. It's also called a gradient. And I am just using, these are one of my favorite watercolors to use in the classroom. They're Crayola Education watercolors, extra bright and blendable. So I'm just using Crayola ones, but I actually really like them, and I've used professional watercolors before. So what you'll do is you'll put down one color first, okay? And then you're gonna dip your brush in some water, and you're gonna go ahead and get the other color that you wanna mix it with. And you gotta do this fairly quickly because the watercolor will start to soak into the paper. And if it starts to soak into the paper, it actually won't work, okay? So it actually was starting to soak into the paper, but I caught it. I accidentally forgot to bring some watercolor paper home, so I'm using just regular paper to do this. All right, so what I did was I laid down one color, I laid down the other, and then I mixed in the middle, and I rinsed my brush a couple of times because you don't want to get the blue up into the pink, and you don't want to get the pink down into the blue. You just want to blend right in the middle. And if you can't see that very well, I'll take this and get it closer to the camera so you can see it a little bit better. Okay. All right, maybe I'll turn a light on too. I don't know if that helps. Okay, so that's how you do an ombre. We're now going to do a Pastel Resist. And you can do this with any color of oil pastel. Remember, the difference between oil pastels and crayons are that oil pastels are soft and they use oil in them, and crayons are hard and they use wax. Okay, so I'm just using these Pentel oil pastels, but any oil pastel will do. Okay, I like to use white because it's kind of fun because it's almost like a decoder when you go over it with the watercolor. So I'm gonna draw a little something with the oil pastel. Okay, and you can't really see that because it's white on white, but now I'm gonna go in and get some watercolor, and now I'm gonna go over the oil pastel. Do you see how it's showing up? Okay, now if it doesn't work, that means you didn't press hard enough with the oil pastel. Okay, and you can actually do the same technique with crayon. So I've got crayons here as well. So I'm gonna draw something with a crayon. Okay, and I used a white crayon again. And now I'm gonna go over it and look, okay? There it is. So that's called Crayon Resist. This is called Oil Pastel Resist. And this is called an ombre. Okay, we're not done. We've still got more to go. Now I am going to use rubbing alcohol, and I'll show you some of the cool effects that you can do with rubbing alcohol. Okay. So I put two colors down. I'm now going to take a thing of rubbing alcohol, and I'm just going to drop some down on the watercolor. Can you see what's happening? So it's making these little circle droplets the rubbing alcohol will actually push any extra watercolor kind of away when you do this technique, and then it kind of binds to the paper so that you can't really paint over it, paint over the rubbing alcohol. Another thing you can do with the rubbing alcohol is, let me see if I have the right tool for this. Yes. So for this, you need a Q-tip, okay? So you're gonna take some watercolor, put it down on your paper, okay? And then you're gonna actually dip the Q-tip in the rubbing alcohol, and then you can actually draw with the alcohol that's on the Q-tip, okay? You can see that a little bit better. All right. Okay, another thing you can do, I'm gonna just show you what this technique looks like afterwards. So you see this crystallization right here? That is from using salt. That is from using salt with the watercolor, okay? And it doesn't work right away. You actually, after you put the watercolor on the paper, you usually, and then you put the salt on, you usually need to wait a good 10-15 minutes before it starts working. Okay, so we're gonna do that with the watercolor here. And like I said, it won't work right away. It takes a while for that crystallization to happen. Okay, you can also do a similar crystallization process with Epsom salts. So that's pretty fun to use too. Okay, so we're just gonna let that marinate and wait on that and see how it develops. All right, the next technique I am going to show you is called wet on wet. And what you do is you're just gonna put some water on your paper like that, and this water's a little dirty. And then you take some watercolor and you put droplets of it on the paper and you just let it spread. Okay, again, that's called wet on wet. Okay. This is also called wet on wet. You take a color, you put it down, and then you take another color and you put droplets of the other color onto it. Okay, so wet on wet, wet on wet. This is the rubbing alcohol with the Q-tip. This is just the rubbing alcohol on top of the watercolor. Crayon resist, oil pastel resist, an ombre, and now we're waiting on the salt to start working, okay? Another thing you can do, you're gonna have to peel an oil pastel to do this next technique. So I am going to peel the wrapping off of this yellow oil pastel. And generally we like to keep the wrappings on the oil pastel because it helps them to keep from breaking. It adds a little support around the oil pastel so that it doesn't break as easily because oil pastels are so soft and creamy. So I'm gonna roll this oil pastel on its side. And this is also oil pastel resist. It's just a different way of going about it. And then you spread it over the oil pastel and you get that same kind of resist. Just it looks a little different. Okay. All right. the salt still works on this paper because this paper really absorbs it. One thing you need to know about the salt is it doesn't work with every kind of watercolor, okay? You need to use a lot of water for it to work. If you put the salt on the watercolor when the watercolor's dry, it won't work, okay? And sometimes you have to wait a while to really start seeing the crystallization. And some watercolors and some papers work better than others to get that crystallization process. I'm gonna show you a few more. Here's another example of salt on watercolor. And let's see here. Here's another one. You can even see the little crystals still on, the little salt crystals still on there, which is kind of cool. Okay, so the salt is starting to work a little bit. It's probably hard to tell in the video, but if you get really close, I don't know about you, I don't know if you can see it on the video, but I am starting to see little white crystals in the watercolor, okay? Let me just see if there were any other techniques that I wanted to show you guys. One other thing, if you have watercolor paper at home, ideally that's what you want to use because watercolor paper is a thicker paper and it has little bumps or grooves in it that hold the water so that it doesn't soak into the paper right away. Because some of these techniques just won't work on regular paper or work as well on regular paper. They might, if you have watercolor paper, they might work a lot better and turn out the way you imagine them turning out. Okay, so that's another thing you want to know. In fact, I can already tell that my wet on wet here looks different than when I do it on watercolor paper because I did wet on wet here, okay, and it looks different than this wet on wet. Another thing that's kind of fun to do with watercolor is you find an old book and you can rip the pages out. Make sure you ask for permission from your parents first, and then you can watercolor the paper, and then I'm going to use this paper, I'm gonna chop it up, I'm gonna cut it up, and I'm gonna make a paper collage out of it. And if you don't remember what a collage is, it's when you take different shapes of paper and different colors of paper and you glue them to another big piece of paper to create some sort of picture or image. So that is one of my plans that I'm going to do with this paper, and I've actually already watercolored a bunch of paper, okay? So it'll be fun. All right, guys, I think that's it. I hope I didn't miss anything. If I did, I guess I can always redo the demo. But if you have any questions, email me or, well, email's probably your best bet. Yeah, okay? I hope everyone's doing well out there. I'll talk to you later. Bye.